Welcome to the presentation on quality risk management. In this presentation, we will see the exact requirements from ICH and WHO for quality risk management in pharmaceutical industry. Here, we will see the different risk assessment approaches, risk control or mitigation strategies and risk acceptance criteria, risk review methods and effective ways for the risk communication. Here we need to very clear on the purpose of risk assessment. Risk assessment is basically a proactive approach and it is used to avoid or manage both existing and emerging risks. Risk assessment approach is used to improve the understanding of processes through identification of hazards in the manufacturing process. Identification of critical points associated to those hazards are identified in risk assessment, and identification of risk reduction actions at the critical steps is also done at a risk assessment stage. In this presentation, we will see what is risk assessment, how to control the identified risk, periodic risk review procedures followed, and effective sharing of the outcome from the QRM. Now, we will move to our main content, that is risk assessment. A risk assessment can be broadly divided into the three main steps. Step 1, identification of hazard. Step 2, risk analysis. And step 3, risk evaluation. In identification of hazards, that is step 1, we evaluate what might go wrong. Here we try to identify what worst thing may happen with the proposed change. Here historical data and description of the possible consequences are taken into the consideration. Step 2 is risk analysis. This is estimate the risk associated with the identified hazard. This is done in a both way, that is qualitative and quantitative manner. Here we analyze the risk or the hazard with the three fundamental things, that is severity, detection and probability. Severity is the possible consequences of the hazard. Detectability is ability to discover or determine the existence or presence of fact of the hazard, and probability is the number of occurrences of a repeating event per unit time. After analyzing the risk with severity, probability and detection, we move to the third step, that is risk evaluation. In risk evaluation, we compare the identified and analyzed risk against the given risk criteria and the strength of evidence for all the three of the fundamental questions. After completion of all the key three important steps in risk assessment, that is identification of hazard, risk analysis and risk evaluation, we move to our next important part, that is risk control. Risk control is a decision making process to reduce the risk to an acceptable level. In a risk reduction strategy, we implement the action plan or mitigation plan to minimize the risk and make it to the acceptable level. Here we basically work on detectability and probability of identified risk. The mitigation plans which will improve the detectability, that is processes that improve the detectability of hazard used as a part of risk control strategy, whereas for the probability we implement the mitigation plan which will decrease the probability or frequency for the occurrence of identified risk. After implementation of risk reduction strategy, we move to our next important part, that is risk acceptance. It is a formal decision to accept the risk residual after the mitigation plan. After risk assessment and risk control, next important part is risk review. The effectiveness of the risk management process should be reviewed periodically. Risk review could include reconsideration of the risk acceptance decisions, and risk review is an essential QMS activity which is incorporated in the all life cycle and continuous improvement approach. After working on risk assessment, risk control and risk review, it is very important to communicate identified risk along with the mitigation plan and current controls to the lower level. Sharing of the outcome of the deployment of QRM is a key factor in the involvement of all staff. Incomplete knowledge about a process and its expected or unexpected variability will not facilitate the QRM process. Proper training shall be conducted on the QRM. Thank you for watching video. Subscribe to channel for more informative videos on pharmaceutical industry.